Hi, everybody. This is Kathy L. Murphy, the Pulpwood Queen. I'm reporting live from my little cabin in the woods. And I've been thinking about riding the rails. And actually, when I was a kid, I went to a hobo birthday party. And the train ran smack dab through the center of my town. And to me, when I hear the train, it reminds me of home. And I really wanted to have a train whistle blowing when I showed this book. This is Wayland, a novel by Rita Sims Quillen, who is a very talented author. And to my, well, the left of me, up in the left-hand part of your screen, Rita is here today, and she's going to talk to us a little bit first about her backstory, about who she is, where she comes from, why she became a writer. But before we even start that, Rita, I've got to read something here because I have an author who I consider a god amongst authors. And his name is Ron Rash. He taught Appalachian studies and in your part of the world. And I've read his poetry books. I picked every one of his books for book club selections, but this is what he wrote. In Wayland, Rita Quillen writes of a Depression era Appalachian community with immense vividness and immense empathy. But like the best novelists, her characters transcend their geographical locale to evoke concerns that touch upon the lives of all people. Whether as poet or as a novelist, Quillen is a writer to be revered. Oh my gosh, Rita.
Yeah.
To have those words, and you've got many, many, many more blurbs, but I just found out she's also published by one of Ron's first publishers. I need to know more about this Iris. Is it press or publisher?
Iris Press, yes.
Tell them, get me their catalog. I want to read everything they're picking. This is fantastic, you all. I was rereading it and I'll share something later. But right now, I'm going to turn the program over to Rita because we want to learn all about you, where you live, where you come from, and what's your story, Rita?
Oh my goodness. Well, thank you all so much, Kathy and Mandy and all the Pulpwood Queens and all my friends who are here. Wayland was released right into sort of the beginning of the pandemic and just immediately fell off a cliff and disappeared. And I was so heartbroken because I had worked so long and hard and was so excited about this book. So I had just given it up for dead. And then here it's been resurrected and people are reading it and I'm just thrilled. Yeah, I do not come from a family of writers or even educated people. I come from a mountain family. My generation was the first generation to go to college. But from the time I was just a little bitty girl, I was just a voracious reader. I went to a tiny elementary school. And by the time I left there in sixth grade, I literally had read every book that was in the library in that school. And I told my parents then that I wanted to be a writer when I grew up, and I wanted a typewriter when I was in fourth grade, and I taught myself to type, so I was, getting ready to write my books. But initially, when I did go to college, I thought I might want to be a journalist, and I worked a little bit in the newspaper world, decided I didn't like that, and so I went into teaching, but I never gave up on my dream of writing. The first thing I ever submitted for anybody to look at was, I don't know if you guys know the writer Lee Smith.
Oh yeah, we picked her.
Oh, she is also one of my just dearest. She's a dear friend and one of my first mentors and role models. Of course, she is for so many. But I submitted something to her for a writing contest and a writing workshop. And when I finally got to sit down with her, she said, "Oh, honey, she talked, there you are." She said, "You are so talented. You are so talented, but you are not a novelist. You are a poet." She said, "You go home and work on writing poetry." So I thought, well, this is Lee Smith, and you do what she tells you. So to my surprise, I found that I just love poetry, and I did take to it, as they say down here, like a duck to water. So for the first 20 years, I guess, that I wrote, I pretty much concentrated on poetry, and I have several books of poetry. And I hope later on in the week when I do some of my blog posts, I may share a little bit of that with you. Yeah, people know me as a poet, so it's been hard to get people to read my novels, to be honest. They don't think of me as a novelist. But anyway, I live on a farm. My husband and I are retired from farming now. We're very lucky that we have neighbors who lease our farm, but we have about 300 acres of beautiful Virginia mountains and fields. And it's just a big cattle farm / wilderness area that has a beautiful creek and a waterfall, and we go fishing. And I have four-wheeler trails where I ride my four-wheeler, and I write a lot about nature and birds and just the outdoors and about growing things. I love flowers. And I used to love to garden, although my back is just about taking that away from me. But anyway, when I, as I said, I always harbored this dream of writing fiction. So my husband kept telling me that I needed to write the story of his grandfather. So that's my first novel, called Hiding Ezra, is a fictionalized account of his life. It's a true, amazing story. He was one of the people who either deserted or refused to report, depending on how you look at it, for World War I. And I got into all this research trying to make sense of what parts of the story that I knew were true, and then being able to make it all fit together and learn all about what it was like here in the mountains during World War I. I had no idea. And it was all about the first pandemic we ever went through, you know. So it was very timely researching. But I published that book in 2014. And then I loved the supporting characters in the book. That Eva and Andrew Nettles were actually enemies in Hiding Ezra. They were at odds, at war with each other, but I knew that there was a romance building there. So I wanted to tell their story of them changing and falling in love later. And so that was the first impetus for Wayland, was to go 10 years down the road into the Great Depression. And I happened to read a book by Studs Terkel about the hobo life and the itinerant laborers and so forth. And there sparked the creation of Buddy Newman. I always want a challenge when I start a book. I want to do something new in each book I write. And so I thought, what have I not done as a writer? Well, I've never created an evil person. I've always concentrated on love and, you know, goodness and positive things and nature and beauty. But I want to think about evil. You know, what does it look like really in real life? So I went back and looked at all the evil characters down through literature that I had always loved because they were so evil. Iago, you know, Hannibal Lecter.
Oh, God.
Just these various psychopaths down through great literature. And I tried to think, what if I could combine them all into a hillbilly? What would that look like? And so it was a really fun challenge. I will tell you a funny little story about it. My doctor, I've had the same doctor for like 40 years. And he always has in my medical record what I'm working on. He always asks me about my writing, and it's in my notes that you can read in my chart, what I'm working on in my writing, because I struggle with it. You know, I struggle a bit with depression, and he knows that. So that's part of his taking care of me, is he wants to know what's going on in my head. So when I started telling him about this book, he was sitting there typing away at his notes, and all of a sudden he starts to get this really alarmed look on his face, and he turns all the way around and looks at me, and he says, "That sounds horrible." he said, "Are you going to be okay with this guy living in your head for, like, I know it's going to take you 6 months to a year. That sounds horrible." I said, "Oh no, Doc, don't worry. It's going to be fine because I know what's going to happen to it." So he said, "Oh, okay." So that reassured him that all was well, you know, that I can handle this. But writing the book was one of the most thrilling experiences of my life. I don't know why. I don't know how to tell you why it was, but just creating him and thinking, how can I make this all work out somehow? Was just one of the most fun writing challenges I've ever had. So I'm thrilled to be here and thrilled that some of you are willing to give it a read. I hope so. And then if you like it, you got to go read how it all started.
Yeah.
You got to go read the other one and find out how in the world Andrew and Eva ever got together after being so at odds, you know, as they were in the first book. So.
Well, Rita, did you ever read Serena by Ron Rash?
Yes,
Talk about evil.
My favorite book. Yes, and come to think of it, that is another one that I used as inspiration.
I
That's
can't believe how
my
much I love
favorite of
that book, and they were so bad. It's about the timber business, and oh my gosh, I love that. And now there's a movie out, talk about evil, that's up for the Academy Award with Kate Blanchett and Bradley Cooper. Oh gosh, I went to the theater and saw it with my daughter on a whim. Talk about evil, evil. Everybody goes, it's not a horror film. Well, it was to me. But you're drawn to those characters. And like now at Disney, the evil characters are the most popular, the villains. They've got villain t-shirts with all the villains on them. So I don't know if this is a trend, but I think you've got a hell of a book, and you've got a sequel now, right, to this book?
No, not yet. This would be a prequel.
Oh, it's a prequel. Okay.
Yeah.
All right.
Now I haven't thought of any way to follow up to Buddy yet. I haven't thought of anything to top him yet. But as a writer, there's nothing more difficult than to take a character that is so evil and awful, and yet you've got to make him or her human enough that people will put up with them, will hang in there, instead of just, and a few people have told me, they said, I had to abandon the book for a while. I had to put it down and then come back to it because I was so upset by him and so terrified of him that I thought the book was too dark. I just couldn't handle it. But then at the same time, I kept thinking, well, I got to know what happens. So you're walking such a fine line as a writer when you're trying to create somebody evil. If they're a wonderful character, if they're charming and endearing, like Eva, for example, she's easy. I mean, she can just flow right out of you. She's a wonderful life force on the page, and she always had something to say to me every morning when I sat down, to write. But Buddy was different, and you become almost like their therapist of your own characters, to try to humanize them and make them real enough, but not too off-putting that the reader keeps coming back. It was a wonderful challenge. I loved it. I loved doing it.
Well, for those of you out there, or who may be watching this on YouTube, because we record everything that we do and put it up on our Kathy L. Murphy channel, can you give us, without giving anything away, just a little, in your words, what this story is about? I did a wonderful, I'm doing now, every time we have our new book club selections, I'm going to do actual readings from the book, because I'm finding, even for myself, when you read the words aloud, you get your voice in your head, your voice in my head. So can you tell us a little bit about the book?
Okay, the book is about a couple who have met and married in middle age. They both had really difficult pasts in history. As I said, they've been at odds over a certain situation they were involved in, but they eventually figure out that they're in love with each other. So they marry in midlife in their 40s, and they adopt Eva's niece, her brother Ezra, who has run into some difficulties in life. They wind up raising his daughter. And at the beginning of the Great Depression, the hobo culture is exploding. There are hobos all over the place, including Appalachia. Gate City, where the book is set, is a railroad town. So there is a pretty sizable encampment of hobos there who show up looking for handouts, or some of them actually looking for work. And Buddy goes out into the countryside. Buddy lets us know right from the start that he's more of a hustler than he is a worker. He's always looking for some kind of scam he can run. So he goes out into the countryside, seeing who he can scam, and he decides he's going to steal a chicken because he's hungry, and it happens to be from Eva's farm. So he meets Eva and her beautiful, beautiful, stunningly beautiful daughter, and he is immediately attracted and realizes he has found his next scam. So he concocts the whole story and preys on this wonderful, sweet mountain family who basically take him in and give him a place to stay and to give him a job at their sawmill that they run. And he just sort of moves into their house almost. He becomes like a member of the family. And at first, they think everything is great, but slowly they begin to realize that he is not who he presents himself to be. And he is doing what we now call today grooming, as this is what pedophiles and sexual predators do. And that's who Buddy is. So he begins to groom this family and groom Katie to get to the point where he feels like he can make his move and do what he wants to do to her. And the story, the tension comes from people in the community, as well as Eva and Andrew themselves beginning to figure out that something is not right. One of the things I do in both of my books is that the community of Wayland is actually like a character. They become very important to how the story unfolds, and how the characters unfold is their interaction with community. That's very much a part of my Appalachian culture and world, is that when you live in a very rural area where everyone knows everyone and knows everybody's business and knows their whole family history, then nothing is as simple as it might be otherwise. And it's all interconnected. And so the community becomes a part of this drama and beginning to realize something is not right here. There's all kinds of smoke, that there's a fire in there somewhere, and things eventually do burst into a forest fire with Buddy's evil ways. So I'll leave it there.
Well, that's perfect, man. If people aren't drawn into that story, I can't imagine what would draw them in. But it's highly readable and highly page turnable, and it's amazing to me how you put your words together to form. You can tell you're a poet. I mean, when I first read Ron Nash's books, I was like, oh, my book club back when I was just in the days of my early chapter, they voted him best read aloud author because he was reading on the porch of my shop in an outside like porch party book club meeting. And I looked around and there were about 35 of us and everybody was bawling. And I think it was One Foot in Eden was the book he was reading. And it was that bathtub bathing scene where he's washing his wife's hair.
Yes. Oh, I've heard him read that live in a room and you could hear a pin drop.
You're just going, and all of a sudden you're looking at him and he's the most beautiful, handsome man you've ever seen in your life. Yes, he is. But that's the way your words are. And what I have to read something because this just, I have never heard anybody really put it like this before. So I just have to read this little snippet, and it's about, it's over halfway through, but it goes, Buddy paused and cleared his throat, and he rocked back on his heels, grabbing the lapels of his jacket and hollered out, whoop! Some of the women jumped and the children giggled. I'm the old original iron jawed, brass mounted, copper bellied corpse maker from the wilds of Arkansas. Look at me. I'm the man they call sudden death and general desolation. Buddy had changed his voice to be more gruff, more country. The men began to grin at one another, and the boys elbowed the boy next to them. Sired by a hurricane, damned by an earthquake, half brother to the cholera, nearly related to the smallpox on the mother's side. Look at me. I mean, wow.
That's Buddy quoting Huckleberry Finn, a part of Huckleberry
Yes,
Finn.
but you make all kinds of references in your book to Rudyard Kipling, where he was, because he was such a man's man. You make, and I think I even marked another spot where you mentioned another, and by mentioning these, they're classic people, but it immediately brings something into mind. And this was another line that I loved. He smiled to himself when he noticed the tree of his favorite kind of apple, spotted smokehouse apples. He'd come back to pick one after he finished. I'll have a bite of the tree of good and evil today. And I immediately was thinking of John Barron's Midnight in the Garden of Good and Evil. I mean, you have so many little, epiphanies for me in the story that just makes it so readable. And where do you come up with all this? I mean, Is it
Oh
the
gosh, I don't know.
situation?
It grows organically out of the characters. That's all I can tell you. When on both of the novels, I ended up writing, and probably a lot of you who are novelists, I guess this happens to everyone. I wrote hundreds and hundreds of pages that didn't show up in the book. I just sit and write everything. I create characters that I know literally everything about. I make up a whole life for them. I make up their siblings. I make up what they did in childhood. I write, stories that they supposedly did this in childhood. None of that comes directly into the book, but it's what I think then leads to these other little details that do come into the book. Like I just knew that Buddy was a word person. He was very much a reader and he loved words, because if you're a sociopath or a psychopath, you have to be really, really good with words. All you do all day is lie and manipulate. So you are a book. A lot of these people are very, very intelligent and very well read. And many of the hobos were. I had to learn all about the hobo world, hobo college. I knew that Buddy went to hobo college and that he was one of the people who would get up and pontificate because he was a narcissist. So, he loved the classroom, that feeling of control over a group of people. So it just made sense to me that that was one of the ways that he got attention and showed off, was to memorize poetry and great literature and be able to recite it. He was a performer because he wanted to be the center of attention. So I don't know where all that stuff comes from, but I have to get the character totally in my head, and then I begin the book or the plot. I have to know them intimately, and then the plot will arise out of that, rather than the other way around, At least that's the way it works for me.
Is Buddy still around? Is he still?
No.
No, you put him away.
No, Buddy, I am tickled. What happens, I will say this, I don't give away the end, but what happened to Buddy at the end of the book, that I had held that idea for years. That actually happened to a person that was a family member of one of my students. And so she had told me that story 30 years ago. And I said, I'm going to use that.
Well, let's open.
I'm going to have that happen to a character sometime. It was immensely sad.
Right. I would like to open it up to everybody. So if you go to reactions and you want to make a comment, hit the little raise your hand thing, and Mandy will get you mentioned. So
Spotlighted.
Spotlighted. We've just learned how to spotlight.
Yeah, we're learning all kinds of things, aren't we, Kathy?
Well, you're teaching me. You're learning them. You're teaching me. So I love it. I love it. So anybody want to have a comment or raise their hand or have?
Oh, Kim does. Let's see.
Okay, Kim. Yay, Kim. Go, Kim.
Well, I just want to say hi, Rita, because I don't ever get to talk to you face to face.
Oh, my sweet Kim. You guys may not know this. Kim was my editor for this, one of my very favorite books that I've ever written, called The Mad Farmer's Wife. And it's where the song that I sang for you yesterday on the blog thing was one of these poems out of this book. And when she was at Texas Review Press, she was my editor there. And then when she started her own press, then I sent her this book of poems, which she published. And I'm
Oh my gosh.
Oh, Kathy, it's so good.
I want to read these books. Okay.
It's so good.
Yeah, we can get you copies of anything you want, Kathy. You just got to tell us what you want.
I want to read her books.
Okay.
Oh, yay.
Okay. I got dumped in it at Texas Review Press because my boss died unexpectedly. I mean, quite suddenly, and I was the assistant, and I just had to jump in with both feet and carry on. Mm-hmm. And Rita was one of my first, Rita and Linda Parsons, who is our poetry editor, were two of our very, very first, two of the books I finished first. Mm-hmm. And they were so gracious and so helpful and kind. All the poets were. So especially I just got to know all these Appalachian people there, and through them, through those two ladies, know everybody. By the way,
much. We do. We know them all. They all talk to us. Yeah, they do.
Yeah.
Adrienne Gianni is from Big Stone Gap. And
I've known Adri before she was this big famous whoop-de-doo, her mom and daddy, they ran the dry cleaners in town and everybody just loved them. And Adriana has always been hysterically funny.
I love her.
She's just fall down funny. But she was not a famous writer then. I knew her as she was a writer for TV. She wrote for, a Bill Cosby show, and she did stand up in New York, and she did all these funny, cool things, but she was not a novelist then. She would come to my governor's school classes and talk to my students and stuff, and they were just blown away by her and just loved her. Yeah, she's so inspirational to young people.
Crystal Wilkinson? Crystal, she lives in Appalachia too.
I do. Yeah, she's a wonderful writer. Oh,
I
man.
met her in one of the book festivals I was at. I invited her to sit at our table. Louisiana Book Festival. She's fabulous, but also different stories. All so different, but a lot of talent in the mountains, y'all. A lot of talent. So, okay, anybody else?
At Appalachia, it's real hot.
Well, I feel so fortunate that we fell into that nest of writers, because we just have met. It's so rich. We keep on meeting new ones like all the time. We got some more for you next summer.
Great to hear. So, anybody else want to jump in? I've never been there. I want to go. In fact, I would love to come out to your farm. I'd love to see it. Wow.
Oh, yeah, you should.
How many acres?
I'm going to post you about 320, I think, something like that. But we only farm or use about, not very much of that, probably 80, 90, 100 acres. The rest of it is just these beautiful woods where we can just walk, and my husband loves to hunt and fish, and I do too. Well, I love to fish. I'm not a hunter, but I like to fish and ride our four-wheelers and hike, and our nephews and people come and camp out on this beautiful creek that's on our place, and it's just our own little slice of heaven. It's great. I'm so blessed. We're so blessed.
What kind of fish?
Red eye, bluegill, smallmouth bass. We have all of them. It's beautiful. It's a really pretty place.
Very cool. Going around the world with books, reading, and here we are, in this wonderful setting. And am I the only person that went to a birthday party in the second grade where it was a hobo theme? I mean, is that the craziest theme for a birthday party? And we were all given, when we came home, a stick with a bandana filled with candy. Isn't that funny?
Amazing.
That I remember making up my face and grandmother.
Yeah, you made it kind of dirty, and I put on kind of what I thought is hobo clothes, but actually it's my Pat Conroy hat and my leather jacket. But anyway, I just thought, what would you wear riding the rails? Something sturdy, and but that train went right by my house every day, and I can't imagine jumping on a train now.
Me either.
No.
Later on in the week, I'm going to share pictures with you guys of the annual Hobo Convention and the Hobo Museum, which is in Britt, Iowa. They still gather. There is still a Hobo Union, a Hobo community. They have leadership. They have bylaws. And the Hobo community, what a lot of people don't realize, I didn't know this, is extremely artistic. And so you're going to be amazed when I show you some pictures of their artwork and their writing.
Like
all the
we actually have we're going to do a article in next month's Reading Nation magazine. You sent me that information, so that's coming out next month, because it's really interesting.
It's fascinating. I had no idea. I thought it was something in the past. I mean, I knew there probably were still occasionally people hoboing trains, but I had no idea it's actually still a big deal. There are a lot of them. And this little town of Britt, Iowa, in the summer swells to a population of like 30 and 40,000 people who come to this gathering to mingle with the hobos and see their art and they go down to the jungle and eat with them and hear their stories. And they have a big parade and they elect a king and queen hobo. And it's just the funnest thing ever. You know, I had no idea that all that was still going on, but it's a fascinating museum.
Well, every time I go to New Orleans, whenever I go to New Orleans, I love to like go out to eat, and I always get a to-go box whenever I order, because you know you get tons of food and get, you know, but half of it in a to-go box, whatever, to give to people. There are so many train jumpers, so they're called train jump. Like the young kids call themselves train jumpers. They don't call themselves hobos, and that's. Yeah. And they travel through. So every time I go to New Orleans, I always meet a bunch of young train jumpers, and I'll just sit down with them and hear their stories. I love it.
Oh yeah,
Oh
storytelling.
my gosh, Mandy. Man, I'm learning new stuff every day. Well, Rebecca's got her hand up. What
Yeah,
do you-
Rebecca's, I got her spotlighted, but we're just talking over.
Rebecca.
I'm loving your talk about hobos. Rita, I'm just over the mountain from you in North Carolina, in Ashe County, and
Okay.
yeah, where I mean, you know, we have ramp festivals and all kinds of events that are so typical to the mountains, but there's tension here between the people who've been here forever and then people who are moving in because it's such a wonderful place to be.
Right.
And anyway, so I so appreciate the way that you're celebrating and preserving and allowing others to experience the stories of your area. And I'm just wondering if you also feel responsibility, I don't know, to try to capture the authenticity of your area.
Very much so. You know how Appalachia has so often been depicted in literature. I mean, it's just the worst stereotypes ever. And even today, there's a lot of controversy within the Appalachian writing community about the fact that there's a lot of pressure sort of sometimes from New York or the big publishing houses. They still want to just publish Deliverance Appalachia.
Yes, yes.
But there's a lot of this dark negative. And I tell people this unapologetically, I write about the Waltons Appalachia. That's the Appalachia I grew up in. This amazing, I had a wonderful family, amazing people. We didn't have a whole lot, but a real strong community and a church-based community, that all those positive stereotypes of Appalachia, that's what I grew up in. And so I've tried to find a way I want to be honest. I don't want to be sentimental or just romanticize, but at the same time, I don't want to present just this negative, dark place. I get so tired of people thinking that all Appalachia is just a bunch of degenerate drug users or just some kind of really dark, scary, sad, negative place. That has not been my experience. I mean, yes, it's out there, but that's not my world. Yeah, that's everywhere. And that's not the world that I'm interested in sharing. I want to, like I said, that's why I make the community almost like a characters. I want people to get some sense of that, of what I'm talking about. It's just a different way of life to be part of a true community that operates sort of, and some people of course don't like it. I mean, it's hard sometimes if you come into the mountains from outside the area, people don't quite understand, and they may feel like that people are judgmental or that they're poking their nose in their business or whatever, but it's just a different culture. And
I think some of that is just how small towns operate, isn't it?
Exactly. It doesn't have to be just Appalachia. I think you're exactly right. I think a lot of small towns or rural areas are like that. Anywhere where there's a place where people truly put down roots, and so their connections go back over long periods of time and over generations, that changes the whole dynamic of a place. It's a joke in Appalachia that people walk up to you and go, "Hi, I'm so-and-so, and you're so-and-so. Who's your daddy?"
Yeah.
Right.
Right. Because that's the first thing they want to know. That's very important. It's not just idle conversation. It's about placing you where you go in the slot. and that's different. It's not like that everywhere. So it makes a difference.
Yeah, that's true.
Well, I think too, I think when
There's
you say
something.
that, Rita, sorry, I apologize interrupting, just to finish that thought. Those people also will save your child if they see your child in trouble. They will watch out for you.
Oh, let me
Right.
tell you, and they'll cut a switch. They'll cut a switch and
That's right.
and
Spank your
chase you
child.
home. Yes, yes. I mean, the whole thing about it takes a village. I lived in that. Yeah, you
Yes.
couldn't get away with squat. I mean, there was always somebody going to rat you out or correct you or whatever. You know, yeah, that's true.
It really is true, because I lived in historic Jefferson, Texas for like 30 years, and I had a hair salon bookstore, and I get a call from the superintendent of schools who's down at the convention center, and she goes, Kathy, she goes, you need to go down to the river because Madeline and all of her buddies are down there going in the water, and we have gar and alligator and stuff. And she goes, you need to get them out. And she said, she leaned out the back of the convention center and said, I just called your mamas, you better get on home. And they did. They came running down. They were like so worried, and I couldn't believe it. I thought, now that's Mayberry, you know.
Exactly. There's a lot to be said for that.
So, okay, who is next?
Think I am.
Okay, go on, go ahead.
Rita, it is wonderful to meet you, and I am just in raptures about how you describe your characters and how you develop them.
Well, thank you.
I mean, they just are so vibrant. They are so not just authentic, but they're so real. And I'm wondering if you ever have any characters who surprise you.
Oh, all the time.
Who perhaps you've planned them all out and you're letting the story evolve from the characters, but do they surprise you to the point where the story takes a detour from what you thought it was going to be?
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. The main character in Wayland, like I said, the main reason I wanted to pick up this book was the character of Andrew Nettles. In the first book, he was supposed to just be almost like a stock character, a flat character, just the bad guy who was chasing Ezra and making his life difficult. And I really hadn't put much thought into him at all. I didn't think I needed to. But as that book went along, he exploded in my mind and my heart on the page. And I got him and I thought, oh, wait a minute. I know who this man is. He is an Appalachian person with a terrible insecurity, you know, like an inferiority complex. And he's trying to overcompensate for all of his childhood and his inadequacies. And all of a sudden I just saw his whole world, his mother who didn't want him to talk like a hillbilly and his daddy who didn't understand him and everything. It just exploded. And at that point, that's when I began to sense that's why he is going to do what he does in the first book and change direction. Why he's going to fall in love with Eva is she's going to bring out his more authentic self that he's sort of been afraid of and tried to squelch. I didn't know any of that when I started the book. I not a thing about it, but he became just so real to me and so important to me in terms of presenting my culture. I've known a lot of Andrew Nettles in my life, a lot of people who were very sort of ashamed or embarrassed about the whole hillbilly thing. You know, they had like a complex about it, and they tried to overcompensate and hide it and wound up being sort of a very unhappy or phony person. I knew this person, but I didn't know when I started the book that he was one of them. Absolutely. So, and that's when you know you've really got something, that you've really got a character when that starts happening, that I thought, oh man, he's got a lot of story to tell. So he was fun to write too. Thank you. Thank you for the question.
Yeah. Any others? Great. Anybody else got their hand up? Okay, well, the process of writing. Okay, so you're on this farm, you're gardening, you're running cattle, you're doing all this stuff. When do you have time to write?
Well, it differs with poetry. That's very much for me, it's very mystical. And I never know when that's going to hit me. I may stop, you know, I'm out running errands and I'll stop and write lines in my poem or in my phone. And I have you know, the little notepad thing that's in your phone, I'll have just a line come into my head. And it's hard to explain this to normal people. You all are probably you're much more normal than I am. But there's a certain voice in my head that when I hear it, I know that's my poet voice, and I know that it's a poem. And it'll be things like, I've told people this story. I was walking through my house one day doing laundry, and that voice in my head said, my father owned silence like the seasons own the trees. And I stopped in the middle of my living room and threw the basket of clothes down and ran to find a piece of paper to write that down. And that was the beginning of a poem. So I never know when that's going to happen. But now with fiction, I have to get up every morning, have my coffee, have my breakfast, get away with all the, you know, excuses I can come up with not to write, and then go make myself sit in a chair for about 3 or 4 hours. That's about my limit. Like we were talking, I'm too hyper and antsy for that. About 3 or 4 hours, I'll stay at it and try to do that every day until it finally begins to take shape. Some days I get a whole lot done. There's days I've spent that 3 or 4 hours that I've written maybe 2 or 3 good sentences. I mean, it happens. So writing a novel wears me out because I'm just too hyper for that, but I eventually get them done sooner or later.
Do you write all the way through the book and then go back and edit, or what's that process?
No, I write, I wish I could quilt. I can't, my mother does, but I write novels like a quilt. I do it in pieces. And actually Hiding Ezra was a script, it was a screenplay before it was a book. I'm more of I think I would have been a better filmmaker than a novelist, but I write scenes. So it starts, once I get all those pages and pages of characters, then I just start writing scenes and begin to piece it together like a quilt. And once I get enough scenes where I see where the story's going, then I'll sit down and begin to write it as a narrative, you know, in regular prose. But I see it first as like a movie script, just in pieces.
That's kind of what Fannie Flagg described her writing process. She actually runs clotheslines down the hallway of her house.
Yeah, I lay it out on the floor.
And
you
she
can't come in my study. You know,
clothespins them like a quilt.
That's smart. Yeah, I hadn't thought of that.
Well, and it gets them up off the floor and it saves you back.
Yeah, that's true.
But that's
Okay, I want to read something that Rita. So with the Rita Nation magazine, I was asking for like articles of where you're from, you know, and in my mind it was like your town, local, like bookstores, your libraries, whatever. This is what Rita sent me, y'all. I'm going to read this real quick. Is that okay, Rita?
hey.
Oh my God. Okay. Because it's beautiful.
Oh, yay! She's got her mug. And here I am holding Starbucks. Go ahead.
Okay, where I'm from Rita Sims Quillen. I'm from Ringer Washers, Pine Saw, and Seven Dust. I'm from a rocky garden lot beside a stunning rose of Sharon. From my father's grafted apple trees, whose blossoms floated like dreams above my head. I'm from banana pudding and pipe smoke. From Ethel and Carrie, from Tendrone business, and what goes around comes around. I'm from Bible school Kool-Aid and Psalm 23. I'm from Roberts Creek and the Holston River, from chicken and dumplings and boiled lemonade, from the bad heart that took my granddaddy at 38, the high fall my father survived. Under the huge maple at my grandmother's house, I watched roaring freight trains blow by from a coal town where my family started, headed toward the city where the future lay. Me caught betwixt and between, on the margin, on the edge of something, straddling the lines of time.
My biography. There you go.
Oh my God. That made me cry. You did what Ron does to me. He always makes me cry when he reads his words.
Oh,
Mandy,
he does
good job. That was beautiful.
Thank you.
And I was expecting like, oh, give me where your local bookstore, your library. And I got that from Rita, and I was like, and the pictures. Hold on, let me see if I can share screen. And
Okay.
hold on a second, because you got to see
Pictures are everything.
They were funny.
Love the pic. I love pictures, especially when you're children and with your family.
You see her sitting in the sink with her.
Oh my God.
That was
That
my
is
Saturday
darling.
night bath. Saturday night bath, and me on my little swing under the pear tree.
Yep. Know that. Them in there. These are
That's
darling.
sweet.
Had those shoes.
Look at my patent leather shoes. I love it.
I
Well,
know.
I was adoring the hairdo, the little
Oh,
curl.
no, my mother cut my bangs and pin
sure?
curled my hair.
10 girls. Boy, those.
Yeah.
Well, this little face right there in the sink, that little face. Look at that little look. Oh, can't stand it.
Oh,
It's
gosh.
so cute.
Yeah.
Very cute. And there's the pan to rinse with. I love it. That's great. Thank you, Mandy. That was awesome.
Cute.
Oh my gosh. Well, so where are you going from here? I mean, my goodness, if everybody doesn't run out and tell every friend they know to buy this book and Finding Ezra, they're crazy not to. This is fantastic. But what do you want to do? What's your dream?
I don't know. I haven't been writing lately. I think the pandemic did something to my brain. It's just been so stressful. And then, as I told you, I've had terrible things happen in my family. I lost my brother and all of that. So right now I'm not writing. If I have a writing dream left, it's to write some short stories. I'm really inspired by Mandy's book of short stories and River Jordan's book of short stories. If you guys,
Oh, yay.
those are marvelous, marvelous. So I love that they do the first person create a character and let them talk type of short story. So that has really piqued my interest. So if I do anything in the immediate future, it might be that I'll be inspired to try some short stories. That's something I've not done. I always like to do something new, give myself a challenge. So I may try some short stories and see what happens.
Oh my God, Rita, I think from your poetry and your novels, you're gonna knock it out of the park. Short stories.
I think she'd be a great prose poet.
Yes.
Yes.
Short form.
Could
Yeah,
we
I have
get that picture?
Tried. Yeah, I've not tried a lot of my friends, like Linda Parsons, you mentioned her doing these beautiful little prose poems that I just love. They're stunning. I've never tried that. So I don't know. That might be a new thing.
Oh, Rita, please do. Please do.
Please use that cover photo, that picture Mandy shared of you in the sink. Oh my God, if I would pick up that book so fast it wouldn't even be funny. That is the most precious thing I've ever seen. So that would be a definitely a pick me up kind of book cover. So we're looking forward to that. And you know what? I know what you're talking about, COVID. COVID has really, if you're I just found out she's a Virgo like me, but we don't have a whole lot of patience, Mandy. And yeah. And we can't sit still and our minds are wandering 50 million. When you're like that and you can't express it with all your friends and you're just holed up like me and
I know it's awful. It's awful. It's so weird.
I went on an art binge this week because I just had to get it out. And then I actually went to the doctor, but I drove the roads for a while. It took my time going and coming back just to get out of here.
Yeah.
It's hard, but I'm back to writing again because I'm seeing the light at the end of the tunnel. That COVID train has been running through, but I'm seeing the light. And the whole time I'm reading this, I'm thinking I can hear Johnny Cash's train songs. I can hear, that train going by my house. In fact, I moved to Jefferson, Texas because I bought a house that I turned into a bed and breakfast because as I was standing and looking at it, the house started to shake. And I looked around and all of a sudden the train went by and everybody else ran for their lives when they heard that. Not me. I go, I'm home. I mean, I was
exactly.
That train
Exactly.
and that train doesn't go through my town anymore. They took it out.
Right.
No longer
They've
there.
about disappeared.
They made them
unfortunately.
walking
So
trails.
lucky.
Yeah.
When I grew up in Middle Tennessee, one of the houses, we moved around a lot, but we stayed in the same town, but we moved around a lot. But one of the houses, the train track was right like across the road. And
Mhm.
I loved it. And it's funny because Corey and Steve, my friends, would jump the train, jump off at my house. And then they knew the schedule in the summer, and they'd catch a ride back to their house and jump off. Well, one day they messed up, jumped the wrong train, and it didn't slow down. So they ended up in Clarksville and had to call their daddy. But yeah.
Now, there's a short story right there.
Oh, it was
Wonderful.
so. And
There
then
you go.
Corey's daddy called me, and I was like, it wasn't my fault. I didn't put him on the train. I was like 12 years old. Anyway, I moved to East Nashville. Like when I left Middle Tennessee and I moved to Nashville, be closer to my son was in college, and I left my little hometown and moved to the big East Nashville, which was only like 30 miles away or whatever. I was like, oh my God, there's no train. First night in my bed. Toot, toot. There was a train, like not far. I was so happy. Then I moved to Florida, right? So I moved to here on an island, and I'm like, oh, I'm gonna miss my train. First night, my window's open. There's a
Good.
train. Yeah, and I was like, everywhere I go.
There's nothing more evocative of
It's true.
journey, and what a metaphor for life than a train and the sound of that train whistle every night. I went to sleep to it, so it's just childhood for me is the train.
And when you hear, so when I was in East Nashville, I had new neighbors. So my old neighbors moved out, new neighbors moved in, and there were young hipsters, and she was real upset and actually had a petition, wanted people to sign it to get the train to not blow when they went through. And I was like, what is wrong with you? Like, I love that sound. And it's like, and first of all, they blow the horn because so people won't run out on the track. I mean, it's like
Yeah,
weirdos, dum-dums, whatever. I wanted to ask you, did you watch or read Hillbilly Elegy?
Oh, I was thinking the same thing, Sandy. What'd you think?
Well, yeah, I have real mixed feelings about it. I thought the first 2/3 of the book was absolutely riveting, and I thought it was actually pretty well written, all things considered. I felt tremendous sympathy and heartbreak for that little boy, J.P. Fan.
A little boy.
I mean, the little boy. It just broke my heart. But it was so sad to me. And I wonder if he was not pressured to do it. But when he got to the end of the book, to then ascribe the blame for that awful childhood to the whole culture, instead of saying, my family was so messed up and so dysfunctional, and my childhood was absolutely insane. I don't know how I survived it. Instead of that, he goes on this whole pontificating philosophical assigning of blame to that very culture that I talked about earlier. And I thought that was very unfair, first of all, but more than that, just really unfortunate. I thought it was a very unfortunate decision he made as a writer and as a person to deal with his pain. But see, what he was doing was absolving his mother. See, I'm a shrink too, people. You didn't know that I was a psychiatrist. All of that was about absolving his mother of the blame of what happened to him. And so I have tremendous sympathy for him. And I hate the way people have been so extra mean to him about it. I think, that people should have had maybe a little more compassion to understand why he did what he did. But yeah, I just thought it was really sad. And I felt like there was an example of sort of a New York pushed book about Appalachia that presented a certain viewpoint that New York wants reinforced all the time of just that very negative, dark place. Yeah, so it just made me sad.
Well, and see, I didn't even think about him as an author. I thought it was the whole Hollywood, the big publisher, that it wasn't like you were so sweet to say absolving his mother. No, I just think he got caught up in the whole thing and thought that's the story. That's what people want to know. That's what they want to hear. So it's like woo, I have to tell you, because I mean, my son was the first kid to go to college in our family, and I was really young when I had him, and whatever. And so when I watched that movie, because I tried to read the book, I couldn't read the book, I couldn't read it because I just thought,
Too
well,
close to home.
this happens, but not every young mother that has a child goes to drugs. Like
Right.
whatever. Like I was married and a mother, and that was that was my life. He didn't even have any college student loans. Hello.
Right.
And it's like, what? So I was like, couldn't read the book. And then when the movie came out, I loved all the people in the movie. And I thought, okay, I'm going to watch it. Oh, it made me sick. Just made me
Yeah.
sick. And
Yeah, it does. It's very complex. If you
It's
live
like-
in the world, it's very
and that's what like the whole big Hollywood. It's like, oh my, so my son actually called me. I just watched it. My son called me, and it was so like the universe. I got that phone call
Yeah.
right after watching it, and I said, hey, did you have, because he was a big reader. I said, did you read Hillbilly Elegy? And he kind of chuckled, and he said, no, Mama, I didn't read it. I said, did you watch the movie? And he said, I can't say it on here. He was like, look at that movie, which made my heart, because I was like so scared what he was going to say. I just was a little bit scared. And then when he said that movie, one of his friends called him that he went to college with, one of the guys that he graduated with, said, oh, Groves, you need to watch this movie. It made me think of you, because they all knew that. It made me think of you because he's done so well. Like he is a commercial contractor, and he's making way more money than I'll ever make. And it made me think of you. You pulled yourself up by your bootstraps, and Justin said, I told him to just off. Like that was not my life. That was not it at all. And it made him really sad too. He's like, that's what people think of Southern people. And it's like, well,
we're about the only group left that it's still politically correct to just be really rude, demeaning, insulting.
Texans, we can claim that too.
Yeah, I've had people say astonishing things to me that I just can't imagine them saying to any other, writer, ethnic person.
Like what? I want to know what they say to you.
Well, I don't know, just things like, hi, how funny the way you talk. Say so-and-so, like tell you to
you
say.
got all your teeth?
Yeah. And just all these corny hillbilly jokes they've heard, they tell those to you. And, things about, oh, I see you've got your new shoes on, glad you got shoes. And just things like that. People will say stuff like that to you. And it's just astonishing, that in this day and age that still happens.
Oh, and not milking your cow? Like, all that.
But and a few times when I've been, I do scholarly quote unquote things a little bit. And when I was still teaching, I would go sometimes to conferences and things and deliver papers about various things to do with literature. And it was always funny to watch the crowd react to me just from hearing my voice. When I would get up and start to talk, that I always said they would sit and look at me like your dog looks at you sometimes. Because they could. I used to joke and tell my colleagues that I imagine them saying in their heads, this is weird. She sounds just like Ellie Mae Clampett and kind of looks like her, but she's saying really smart stuff, So, but it's just, it's a hard stereotype to live up under, if you are an educated, normal person. It's very tiresome.
To live in the South.
Happens to live in the mountains, yeah.
Rita, it happens to everybody. When I kicked off Diane Sawyer and Charlie Gibson's Read This Book Club and announced my book, I was announcing it to a book club in New Jersey. And Charlie Gibson goes, so what do you think about Kathy's choice of Dive from Clausen's Pier by Ann Packer? And she goes, I don't know. A Southern hairdresser, what could she know about reading? She said this on national television. And Charlie Gibson just turned so red. He turned to, they were off. He said, I'll let you know, I didn't know what book Kathy was going to pick. But he goes, I've read that book, and it's one of the best books I've ever read. And I'll tell you, the minute I hung up the phone and was off the show, my phone rang off the hook for 2 days of Southern women calling me and saying, how dare somebody say somebody from the South because they're a hairdresser. What people didn't know is they judged me by the cover. They didn't read the book, you know.
Right.
I've been to 7 colleges. I now finally got my college degree, but you know, that isn't even what matters. What matters is judging.
Right.
You
Right.
know, we've got to stop judging in this world and get to have a conversation with people and find out it's time to stop stereotyping, whether it's Appalachia, whether it's, you know, where you're from in the country, or whether it's the way you talk, like Mandy. I think your voice is the most beautiful, precious thing I've ever heard in my life. It's just fantastic. So
I'm
I
a militant.
I
I'm a militant hillbilly. I'm not giving up my accent.
Well, I'm
That's
not
fine.
giving up mine either. People, I worked at Vanderbilt, and what's so funny, because people will even say to me, because I've not been lucky enough to travel the world, but I worked at Vanderbilt for 26 years. I taught fellows who were coming in to learn cardiology from all over the world how to do echocardiograms. I got to meet some of the most interesting people. And as a young girl, my cousin married a man from Tehran, which people don't realize. They think, oh, you're just some dumb hillbilly, don't know nobody, but you know, it's like, it's really funny how people just do judge you. And somebody said something about my, you know, how you talk. And it's like, I'm really proud of my dang Southern accent. And I'm not going to try to look, I mean, I don't try to, I can talk a whole lot more Southern if you want to hear it, but I'm not gonna change the way it is.
Right.
Well, Jim Garrison has his hand up. Poor fella's been sitting there and we just
come on, Jim.
Hi, hope you can
Hi,
hear
Jim.
me. We're sitting out on our back porch. I always have my other here with me. And I just wanted to say I really appreciate the Appalachian and the Appalachia artists, writers, and the music. I have friends who are big into Appalachian music. You know, I grew up near the Brushy Mountains in Arnold County, North Carolina. My family's been there since probably 1740s.
Oh, wow.
And, I think I grew up speaking hillbilly, and I learned English as a second language. I still, you know, I was 18 years old before I knew that Arsh Tater was not what I thought it was. They called it Irish something or other. But I appreciate your writing about the area, and I really like seeing this area touted in both music and in literature. So thank you.
Well, thank you. I very much appreciate that. Very much appreciate it.
We appreciate your storytelling, and I know we're at that time, so we have a perfect ending for this book club meeting because Rita has many talents, and now she's going to bring out her other one.
Yeah, I'm here tonight. Normally I don't get to join you guys for these wonderful gatherings because my music class, my music group meets on Tuesday nights. I've played old time music all my life. My grandfather was a fiddler. And my late brother that I mentioned was a fantastic, amazing musician, self-taught mostly, as am I. And we play old-time mountain music, Scots Irish music. I play the Irish drum and do a lot of different things. But in recent years, I started setting some of my poems to music. So I'll finish with one. I mentioned to you that, Mandy had mentioned when she read that little where I'm from thing that I mentioned that I lost my grandfather when he was very young. One of my grandfathers, I'm the one who played the fiddle. I never knew him. I just hear all the stories about him. But he died young and my grandmother never remarried. And I wrote a poem about that, and which I turned into a song. So I'm going to end with that. It's called 50 Years Gone. Think he'd stay gone, me 50 years alone, but he comes to me at night and dreams quiet and wide. I rise from my quilt in tears, alone in my bed, 50 years, 50 years. It's hard to see his face when I am awake, but in my sweet dreams, he's right back in his place. My quilt is his arms, my pillow his chest, his memories an ache, my constant guest. He's kissing my lips, his hands on my skin, snuggled warm in our bed, the rain singing on tin. I can hear his voice clear as rain, can see his hands trace every vein. I rise from my quilt in tears, alone in my bed, 50 years, 50 years.
Oh, man. Thank you, Rita. That's beautiful. I want to hear more. We're going to have you do a concert for us.
Well, go to my Rita Sims Quillen website, and there's
Okay.
my YouTube channel, and you can see a bunch of videos of my music, and I'll try to post some more. The reason I'm here able to be with you guys tonight, didn't have to get up for my music class, is Thursday night. We're going to play mountain music and Irish music for the St. Patty's Day celebration.
Oh, yeah.
I've got videos of all the gang of crazy talented people that I play music with. I'll try to maybe share some of those videos later on in the week and let you hear some good old mountain music. So
I
thank
would
you all
love
so
it.
I know
Thank
you could be doing so many things tonight. Thank you so much for being with me and having me, Mandy and Kathy and all the gang. And I hope you enjoy my books. And I'm so proud to know all of you. What an amazing group of people you are. You make things happen and you make the world a better place. And I'm proud to know you.
Well, that's all we can do, right? Be in service to others.
Yes.
Thank you. It's all about the story. Everybody check out Wayland and Finding Ezra by Rita Sims and Quillen. And I'm telling you, if everybody doesn't share this when I get it posted on my YouTube channel, do you want me to send you the video for your channel?
Oh, yes. That would be wonderful.
I will do that. I will do that
Wonderful.
because it was so good that we couldn't hear the guitar that much at the bottom. So I'm going to go,
Sorry.
okay, no, we're going to go to your website. We're going to listen. So thank you, Mandy. Great
Thank you.
comments. Thank you, everybody, for your participating. And we'll see you tomorrow on our blog. Oh, the Pulpwood Queen presents. So
I just want to say, I don't have my book, Rita, because I had it in my van. So I could read it, like I've already read it once, but I had it in my van. So when I had to make some, whatever, I just had it there so I could read it more, and I meant to bring it in.
Oh,
You're very good at whatever, Mandy.
she is, don't apologize. My goodness. Thank you, everybody, for joining us. And I'll have it up on the channel tonight. I'll share
thank
it,
you.
and I'll share it on the Pulpwood Queen Presents her Picks page so people can see it tomorrow for your blog. Thank you, Rita. I'm looking forward to reading more of your books, Kim. I'm looking forward to that. So hopefully we'll talk soon too. So bye, everybody. Thank you for joining.
Bye. Thank you so much for being here. So nice to meet all of you.
You
Thank
too.
you. Thank you. Thank you.
Bye-bye.